Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy betrayed by Nami and Robin part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Let's start this video. What the hell is going on? Why are you doing this one? Chopper screamed, looking at the bodies of his crewmates all sprawled on the deck of the Thousand Sunny. He stared at the once Nakama and chef of the Straw Hat crew. Sanji, why are you attacking us? We let you go after Whole Cake Island. You fought so hard for us to let you go 3 weeks after your wedding and betrayal of us all. Nami screamed as she remembered the events of Whole Cake Island. Nami, I'm sorry, I'm just following orders from my captain. I wish it could be another way, but you guys challenged Big Mom. You had to know there would be consequences from following that idiot forever. Sanji explains before he feels a hand come across his face. That idiot, as you call him, used to be your captain too before you betrayed us all, Nami stated, seething with rage. Sanji looked away from her as Capone went to attack Zoro once more, only to be cut down with hockey-infused blades, much to Sanji's and Capone's surprise. Oi Vince McSanji, is this what you wanted to do with the freedom you have now? After abandoning your responsibility and dream to satisfy your own selfish endeavors, or is this all some sad attempt to make your father happy? Zoro asked, staring directly at Sanji, blades drawn ready to attack the next thing that moved. Sanji waved his hand, and his siblings appeared near him, leaving Usopp, Robin, Brook, Frankie, Jinbei, Carrot, Pedro and Chopper on the ground, almost broken completely, all the Akuma no Mi users wearing Kairoseki cuffs. They then began to approach the remaining 2 former crewmates, turning his back. He looked over at his ship, realizing his father's body was on the ground, but couldn't see Luffy anywhere. He figured that he was thrown in the ocean, and his father was tired. After all, he knew firsthand how strong his former captain was when he was angry. Until his youngest and second eldest brothers came flying past him, and then he saw it on top of the crow's nest post, his father's head encased in a more deformed version of his helmet. He quickly turned to see Luffy making a face he had never seen before. It was like a calm and controlled rage. As he walked towards the former crewmate holding his oldest brother in his right hand, dragging along the man clearly near dead, Luffy spoke. Yo Sanji, why have you returned to my ship? Hurting my Nakama once wasn't enough, almost killing me while I stood still wasn't enough for you. The look in Sanji's eyes was fear, not of what may happen to him or of what Luffy was saying, but of the fact that the man whom he once respected to call his friend, the man who took him in as an equal, who had never even thought so much of purposely harming another, had taken a life. Not just any life, the life the king of the Germa kingdom, Vince McJaji. He looked at Luffy and the utter chaos he had brought to his former crew, as he looked at Ichiji laying lifeless in Luffy's hand, Yonji, and Niji lying lifeless on the deck at his feet. He looked at his sister as she stared in horror. Riju then without hesitation grabbed Nami. Drop my brother or I will kill the girl, she said, staring directly at Luffy's back. Almost instantly she felt his haki suffocating her like his hands were metal welded on her throat, and all he did was looked at her. Sanji realized then that the man before him, who put no one above his Nakama, but also with almost childlike innocence and refused to kill, was gone, and no matter what happened, it would be best to leave and go back to Whole Cake Island with his crew while he still could. Luffy, we'll leave, I promise, just please release my siblings, we won't be back, I promise. Almost instantly Luffy had Riju by the throat and grabbed the rest of Sanji's siblings and threw them onto their ship, not without taking a few things first to replace all his crew had lost. He then walked beside Sanji and whispered something in his ear, which made Sanji's eyes go wide, then darken as he looked away from the destruction and damage caused by his crew and the now unconscious body of Capone, which Luffy had Zoro throw into the sea. Knowing what he sounded like, and with almost a demon-like aura, dared Sanji to go in after him. Sanji then looked, realizing if he went in after him, it would be only to fall to a sea king. He looked at Zoro, who glared at him with contempt as he freed his comrades, then to Nami, who laid shocked in Luffy's arms, still reeling from the attempt on their lives by Sanji and his new crew, and finally to Luffy. Luffy, the man who took him to chase his dream and gave him a purpose, the same man he had betrayed not 1 week prior, who looked at him with not anger, contempt, or rage, but with sadness and disappointment. Now that you're a Big Mom pirate who I suspect is still in bed with the man who took everything from me, which means you have sided with the very Marines who stole everything from me, Luffy spoke clearly and concisely, trying not to release a wave of haki at Sanji. You proved that when you almost allowed your family to kill my crew, to kill Nami. The rage in his voice now clearly heard as he put her down and began approaching Sanji. Luffy, I would never allow anything to happen to Nami. He then got grabbed by his collar. Luffy now face to face with him, he speaks loud enough for everyone to hear him. If the woman I love would have died due to your cowardice and not having faith in your crew, I would have searched for you to the ends of the earth, killing anyone in my wake just to get to you and end your entire bloodline, women, children and all. I would wipe your kingdom from the map and hunt you beyond death. Sanji angrily threw a kick covered in haki at Luffy, to which he reacted by punching his leg, shattering the bone with a sickening crunch. Sanji fell to the ground screaming and writhing in pain. He looked at Sanji before speaking. This isn't a game if you wanted into this pirate crew, and this pirate life it is for life. It was my fault for believing you understood this, he said, raising him up by his collar, the rest of the crew standing behind him, all of their eyes resolute. He tossed Sanji over to his ship. Usopp, Frankie, start the ship. Nami, give them the heading, he shouted as he walked towards his quarters. Zoro followed behind him as the rest of the crew got to work, seeing him act in such a manner and come out with a sudden realization of how he felt for Nami. He wanted to also ask where they were headed, but when he got to the hallway where the captain's quarters were, he screamed, "Luffy." He was bleeding from his mouth and ears, and his breathing was ragged. "Oi oi Luffy, what's wrong?" he screamed as Luffy opened his eye, and the hockey left his toning of his skin. "Zoro, take me into my room and tell everyone I'm resting, and Nami will take care of the rest." As he hurriedly carried Luffy into his room, he looked at his captain with worry and anger. "I allowed this to happen. I can't believe that I'm still this weak after those 2 years training hard. I need to train harder, get stronger, so that my captain never has to deal with things like this." He spoke fighting tears, looking at Luffy after remembering that this was the second time Luffy needed his strength and he wasn't available. He sat there for a minute thinking and proceeded to walk out of the room, to his surprise, finding Nami standing at the door about to knock. "Zoro. What's going on, Nami? Did you need something?" "Nami? Zoro, is he okay? I know it was hard on all of us letting Sanji go like that, and after what he said I need." Zoro holds his hand up. "See. If you think now is the time to address that after what he has been through, just to tell him what he already knows. We all got the memo, and I understand why you're hurt. We know how you felt about that traitor, but don't use Luffy to get over that pain. It's not fair to him or yourself." Nami stood there confused as Zoro told her that only Chopper would be allowed in the room, or himself, till he woke up and stated otherwise or they reached their destination. She noticed he looked serious as he proceeded to ask where they were headed. "Luffy told me that we needed to go to his home to see his mothers, so we are going back to the East Blue." As the rest of the crew watched to see for enemies, Robin and Usopp noticed Nami running to her room in the women's quarters and Zoro calling for Chopper, telling him he needs to go check on Luffy, then proceeded to sit in the front of the hallway leading to Luffy's room. Robin and Usopp went after Nami, while Jinbei told Frankie a direct route out of the Grand Line that they would be able to use eventually to return, and it would take them 3 weeks to return to the East Blue. The Nami, Robin, and Usopp. "Boy, Nami, what's wrong?" Robin inquired, seeing her eyes beginning to water. Usopp stood behind her, his back to the wall, figuring what was going on. "Robin, I need to see him, to talk to him, tell him how I feel after all that's happened. I just need to see his smile," Nami cried as Robin pulled her into a motherly hug, rubbing her head. "It's not that surprising. Zoro won't let you see him, especially if your feelings are that fickle that as soon as one leaves you jump to the next, especially since you were ready to leave the crew for that guy and he leaves you behind," Usopp stated with a hint of scorn in his voice. "What are you talking about, Usopp?" asked Robin, looking shocked and confused at his statement. "You really don't know, Robin, how Sanji and Nami planned to leave the crew together because they were going to marry?" "What the hell are you talking about, Usopp? Why would I leave the crew and marry Sanji of all people?" Nami asked, angry and visibly shocked. "Everyone knows Sanji was just my friend. Why would I even leave the crew if I ever married? This place is my home." Hearing the sincerity in her voice, Usopp decided to believe her and fill her and Robin in on what he knew. "Nami, before I start," Usopp began, "how long have you and Sanji been involved versus your feelings for Luffy, and did you really not know how he felt about you all this time?" "I was never involved with Sanji in a romantic sense. We were friends, no more or less than me and you," she stated firmly, "and no, I didn't know he felt the way I felt. I've felt like this for him since Drum Island. I was barely awake when we got to Chopper, and all he said was, 'They're my friends, my nakama, save them, don't worry about me, please save them, please save her.' That moment I was weak and wanted that to be the reason I felt that way, but as time went on I realized I loved everything about him, from his idiocy to the side of him that smiles for all of our sakes, even his innocence. I truly realized it when I got the paper after Marineford, not needing to explain, as the pain of that day still affected them all, and my heart shattered as I saw the image of his almost lifeless body. I thought about if I had lost him, the man who fights to the brink of death, I would rather go back to Arlong Park than live in a world without him." Robin looked shocked at the confession and happy that she felt so strongly, while Usopp looked at her with a new resolution. "Hi, so you wanna know why Zoro said what he said and why we thought you were eloping from the crew with Sanji?" Usopp asked. "That's because that's what he told Luffy right before you left Dressrosa. Normally Luffy would question it to both of you if not for a prior conversation that was had a few months ago right after Fishman Island." Flashback to the captain's quarters after leaving Fishman Island. Luffy calls Usopp, Zoro, Brook, Sanji, and Chopper into his room away from the girls and Frankie. As all the guys enter, Luffy asks them to sit down at the table and proceeds to speak. "Luffy. Guys, I have something I need to say. Since it's been 2 years, Zoro is already aware of some of the things I'm about to say, and I'm sure the rest of you have figured it out to a degree." All except Zoro look at him inquisitively, wondering what their captain was gonna reveal to them. "Zoro. Luffy, are you sure he should be here for this talk? It's not gonna be easy dealing with his emotions once he finds out. Luffy just smiled at Zoro before nodding and taking a deep breath. Usopp. Oi Luffy, what's going on, is everything okay? He asked, looking at his captain with concern. Sanji. If it's bad news you might as well just break it to us. All nodded in agreement at Sanji's statement as Zoro just looked inside. Luffy. I started this journey over 3 years ago, gathering first Zoro, the strongest swordsman and pirate hunter in the East Blue. Then Nami joined only temporarily at first as my navigator, and after her we met Usopp, a man who wanted to be brave and whose father was even then one of the world's best marksmen, so it was like meeting a long-lost childhood friend. After that Sanji joined the crew and our ship was stolen by none other than Nami, who was battling her own personal demons and refused to ask for help. We sailed to her island and tore down the walls of her oppression. At that time I didn't know why, but I felt like I had to destroy everything that took away her smile. Like if she wasn't smiling something was wrong with the world. Everyone in the room, even the innocent Chopper, began to understand where he was going. Sanji. Luffy. Let me finish. So I resolved that she should be part of the crew no matter what, and she came with me on this journey, and although over the years Sanji has expressed his fondness for her, he even did the same for Robin and Vivi when they were with the crew, but it still slightly bothered me when he did this for her. When she was on the brink of death I felt like I couldn't breathe. I remember feeling like a failure, and I needed her to be okay. That's how we came to meet Chopper and Doctorine. But after we added Chopper and Robin to the group, we had another issue. I had hoped that the feelings I had for Nami by then would dissipate, but they intensified with every save, and when I heard her pleas, no matter how weak I felt, my strength would explode and I would be at her side. We met Frankie, and even when we met Brook, when Nami called out, I felt that surge of power on Water 7 and on Thriller Bark. When that lion head had her, it was like part of my heart disappeared. No matter what I did it wouldn't come back, not until I saw her standing there fighting beside us, beside me. Sanji. Luffy, I need Zoro. Let him finish. We all need to hear this as it seems like it will affect the future of the crew. Luffy. And when we were all attacked in Sabaody by Kuma, it was like hell seeing all of you taken from me and reveling in my own weakness, and was sent to Amazon Lily, where I met Bo Hancock and the rest of the warriors, where Hancock asked me to marry her and kept asking about us having a family. That's when it hit me that the only person I wanted to be with in that capacity was Nami. I soon realized I didn't have time to search for you all, as I realized that Ace was in danger, and that was when I went to Impel Down, where I was almost killed multiple times, and in the end, for more power and strength to save him and protect you all after almost dying, I gave up 10 years of my life in Impel Down. They all looked at him wide-eyed, visibly shocked at his revelation. Luffy. I realized after losing Ace the reason I couldn't fall apart at that time, as I was reminded by Jinbei, was you all, but the feeling was different for each of you. And I was made to realize if I was too weak again the next time, Nami may be taken from me in the same way Ace was, and I couldn't allow that to happen. So I trained and read a lot really, and I worked on helping me understand everything I could so I could get stronger mentally as well as physically. So that when we set sail this time I could let Nami know that I want her to be my queen. Luffy said this proudly and with resolute determination. Usopp. So for the past 4 years you have been in love with Nami and you never told her, and now you want to tell her why. Zoro. Why do you want to know why? Usopp, don't tell me you're in love with that weather hag, earning a look from Luffy and Sanji. Usopp. No, it's just I have been waiting to tell Kaya back home how I feel, and I need to know that if it's the same for this idiot. Why he decided now of all times was the time when we could die out here in this ocean on our way to Raftel Island, fighting one of the Yonko too, of which all have issues with us, Big Mom and Blackbeard. Why now of all times would you tell her? Luffy. It's exactly because of that I understand the risks like no one else, and if I died today, as long as she knew how I felt, I would be able to die a happy man. Sanji. Luffy, Nami and I have been dating since the Sabaody archipelago. We didn't tell anybody because of what happened, and we are gonna leave the crew after we get close enough to the end of the Grand Line opening up to the East Blue, so I can take her to meet Zeph and introduce her as my woman and propose. Zoro. Oi Cook, don't just start making shit up, it's not funny or a game. Sanji. I'm not. We even spend most of our time together. We figured it would make things awkward if we started suddenly acting like on the ship, so that's why every time we dock, we are the first two to go off together, or her and Robin. Chopper. Is that why you and her had that suitcase leaving that hotel in Fishman Island? Usopp. Sanji, show us some proof. They all walk towards the deck and he approaches Nami, who now sits alone, Robin in the crow's nest. Sanji. Yo Nami, he calls in a serious tone, low enough that only the two can hear. Luffy knows about Fishman Island. I'm sorry I had to tell them. Nami. How does he know about that? Is he upset that we? Sanji. Chopper saw us leaving the hotel, all of us. Luffy wants to know why and won't believe my explanation, so they need for you to tell them. Nami then looks over to Luffy, seeing how serious he looks. Nami. Luffy, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, it's just that I didn't want anyone to know, so I met him in secret, she spoke, and not that it's anyone's business but mine. Zoro. But why out of anyone did you accept Hero Cook, Nami? Sanji is more private about these matters. I mean, if I had chosen Luffy, everyone would know before we leave any port. At this point Luffy's face almost dropped, shaded by his hat. He then did the unexpected. Luffy? Arigato Nami, you're right, he said, showing his usual goofy grin. Sorry, I didn't mean to stick my nose where I shouldn't. I can promise you one thing, it won't happen again. Nami could feel her heart shatter, but wasn't aware of the reason or the misunderstanding she caused. As Luffy began to walk away, she began to approach only to be stopped by Sanji, Zoro, and Usopp. Flashback over. Nami now looked mortified at Usopp, who stared at her, and Robin, whose mouth dropped as she listened to his story. But Usopp, that wasn't right, Nami cried. That isn't what happened, and that's not why we met at the hotel on Fishman Island. Usopp looked at her in surprise. If that wasn't a reason, then why? I mean, you even confirmed it in Luffy's face. And now you want to make it right. What's going on, Nami? You promised that after Arlong Park, you would be honest with us no matter what. Robin looked between her and Usopp before speaking. She has been meeting Arlong's daughter and wife. Usopp took a minute, then screamed upon realizing what Robin said. What the hell do you mean you've been meeting that lunatic's family? Zoro, Chopper, Jinbei, and Frankie came in the room asking what's with all the yelling. After it was explained to them in full by Usopp about what he had just heard, almost immediately Jinbei is the first to speak. So after everything that you went through with Arlong and his crew, you still meet with his family? I think after this I have one question. Why? I mean, why subject yourself to see that which caused you such pain and anguish of seeing Susum and Hagura? Everyone looked at her expectantly as she fidgeted around and finally took a deep breath. Because back at Arlong Park, Hagura took care of me after Arlong beat me or smashed my face into the table, or even went as far as. She pauses as she sniffles, holding back tears, remembering the pain she was caused. Flashback. When Hagura came to help me on those nights when Arlong took out his frustrations on me, it made things a little more bearable, so naturally I was happy. But that didn't last long. One night Arlong had gotten drunk with his crew, and as I was looking for Hagura, he found me outside of my room and threw into a bunch of barrels. He then approached me and asked why I left my room. Nami said, quivering, I was looking for Hagura-san. At this Arlong smiled as he spoke. She isn't here, she left this island a few hours ago. Nami looked visibly scared as Arlong continued to speak. She and I are having a baby, we are gonna have a child, and she has gone back to our home to give birth and will be gone for some time in order to raise the child. So while she is gone, I think I will use you for my desires, Arlong said as he ripped her clothes off. Began begging him to stop and screaming in pain for someone to help her, only for her pleas to fall on deaf ears. He took her by force. She begged for it to be over as she did. Arlong would make sure to prolong it, telling her it was her privilege to bear his children on earth as Hagura bears them under the sea when he released his seed inside of her every time. She was so grateful. Najiko and Dr. Neko gave her pills to avoid pregnancy, and that Arlong never found them. Then one day 3 months after the abuse began, she set out to the sea with her and Arlong's deal in mind. When she turned 18, she had no idea she would meet Luffy after 6 months and coming so close to her goal. And to her happiness, Luffy was the savior who she begged and pleaded for all those nights. Arlong smashed his way into her room and raped her, laughing at her pain. Flashback over. Everyone looked in horror at Nami, who had begun to break down in tears while explaining what happened at length to her in her years in slavery at Arlong Park. Jinbei spoke. If what you're saying is true, then I truly owe you an apology for allowing him to roam free from the Fisher Pirates and take over the East Blue, he said, holding his head down. Zoro, who had realized that Luffy and the rest, including himself, had the wrong idea about what was going on due to Sanji's lie causing him to seethe with rage. Gomenasai Nami, I am sorry for not having more faith in you, he spoke, but why after all of that would you go see this woman? Robin looked at Nami and asked if she could explain it to them before Nami nodded, too distraught to answer his question herself. Zoro, it was because of what happened to her that she felt the need to meet with this woman, so that Hagura knew Nami didn't blame her for what happened, and so Hagura could learn the truth of Arlong Park and why the home she made with Arlong was destroyed upon her return. In the end, she understood why I stood against Arlong. She just wanted to know what wasn't in the papers. Robin finished as Nami began to speak finally. I would have never been with Sanji in that way. I know I promised to be honest from then to be honest, but I wanted to be sure I made the right decision before I told him, and when I thought it was found out, that's why I apologized to Luffy, not because I chose Sanji, because I didn't tell you all. So when he smiled and walked away, I thought he was okay with it, Nami said, holding her tears back. Robin, what do? I heard him and didn't even know it. You haven't realized that you only speak about the course we're taking nowadays, and that since Punk Hazard he has been changing, steadily distancing himself. Usopp screamed. He has been becoming more mature and less like the lovable idiot we all decided to follow after being drawn to his light. Usopp, relax, Zoro spoke. Nami, he isn't wrong in a way, you're the reason he has changed, and whether it's for the better or worse remains to be seen. For now we should. His mouth gets covered by a hand that seems to grow out of his shoulder, as does everyone else's. Nami, for now you need to confirm your feelings for everyone to understand before we decide how you should approach the captain, Robin says as Chopper begins to try to remove her hand. So how do you feel about Luffy? Nami wipes her eyes, takes a deep breath and screams, I love that idiot, everything from his goofy ass grin to his weird if not adorable laugh, even the face he makes when he gets angry. Since the day we met, I have loved him. Even when I was being a jerk to him, he still smiled and warmed my heart. When I need him, he is there and always knows what to say to help me feel better. If I can't have him in my life after all this, I would rather be back at Arlong Park in that stuffy little room. Robin smiled and spoke as Chopper kept trying to peel the Hana Hana hand from his mouth. Then you need to go tell him, explain it all to him. Ow. Robin looked over at Chopper, who had shot her with a mild sedative. Nami, you can't go see Luffy now, Chopper stated. He isn't on the ship and has ordered that everyone else remain aboard until his return from that island over there, he said, pointing to an island. Luffy lands on the island only to be greeted by people holding revolvers and laughing in his face. Oi, with that pistol, you will risk your life. This isn't a child's game, he says as he releases a wave of Conqueror's Haki. So by pulling those pistols, you need to be ready to die if you can't beat the one you are trying to battle. Oi, Luffy, over here, a voice screamed as Luffy looked over and smiled warmly at the approaching Revolutionary Army second in command. What's going on, Luffy, you called, and luckily I was in the area, so let's have a drink. Sure, Sabo, I have a lot to fill you in on, and we are waiting for one more person. He isn't one of the usual, but for this mission I need both of your help. After waiting on the outskirts of the island for a few hours, someone comes flying down to the island, landing in front of Luffy and Sabo. Yo Luffy, how you been? It's been a while, says the man smiling at Luffy. You called me and I'm here, so what's going on? Luffy looked at his comrade standing before him, first at Sabo, who wore his traditional combat boots and pants, a red vest over his usual white nobleman's blouse. His hair had grown since he and Luffy had last seen each other, so it now covers his scarred eye. Then to Kobe, who since the events of Marineford and Punk Hazard, seeing Aokiji lose firsthand, left the Marines and wandered the sea, keeping villages safe from corrupt Marines and bad pirates. Wearing his trademark blue-rimmed glasses on the top of his head, traded up his Marine uniform for a black sleeveless hooded jacket with the kanji for silent written on the back, black jeans and combat boots, his hair long and tied in a wild ponytail. Yo Kobe, you're late, I was beginning to think you wouldn't show, Luffy quipped before letting his expression turn serious. Guys, I need your help, and I know it's a lot, but it's easier if I ask you than if I ask my crew right now. Sabo and Kobe looked at Luffy shocked. So what happened that you can't trust your crew, Luffy? Sabo asked. Don't get us wrong, we are happy you asked us for our assistance, but it sounds like you have an issue trusting your crew right now, Kobe said. So Luffy, what's going on? Why have you called us to this island, surrounded by the calm belt, under cover of night, away from your crew? Luffy begins to explain what's been going on to Kobe and Sabo. Meanwhile, back at the ship. Topper, what do you mean we aren't supposed to leave the ship? Zoro screamed, and Usopp said, where the hell is this place? Why is he here? Zoro, you won't be able to go anyway, he said. Your job is to protect the ship, and we are to listen to this. Chopper pulls out a recording dial and hands it to Nami. Why are you giving it to me, Chopper? She asked, looking worried and confused. It was part of his instructions that you be the one to hold on to it until he returns, Chopper said as Nami pushed the button and Luffy began speaking. Recording begins. Hey guys, if you're hearing this, I have decided to embark on a mission with the help of two people not from this ship, but that you more than likely have met or heard me speak of. I going to this island to free 3 people, and I need this to be a stealthy mission that would be hard if you guys couldn't even stop arguing long enough to ask Chopper how I was health-wise. Everyone looked at Chopper as he just pulled his hat over his eyes. But it's fine, I am going to free a friend of mine from my days on Amazon Lily. She is gonna be our crew scientist. Her and her siblings happen to be the children of Dr. Vegapunk. She is the world's foremost authority on devil fruits and happens to be a fruit user herself, he says smiling, and so are her little brothers. They will both be going with the Revolutionary Army since I called Sabo to help me infiltrate this island prison made by Akainu to keep certain powered people and their powers as a use for himself. He treats and uses these people as slaves, so about a year ago he approached me. Dr. Vegapunk came to Amazon Lily 6 months before I left the island. He came to me and revealed he and my father asked Kuma to save us that day and show us that we still had a long way to go before we were ready for the new world. Which had its purposes, but more importantly he could get me alone and ask me for a favor without anyone interfering and teach me the things I need to know to survive in this world. Well, Rayleigh taught me hockey. Afterwards he asked me to keep one promise that before I leave the new world, I would find an island surrounded by calm belt currents and the outer walls made of kairoseki. I would break into the prison and save his children. So I took the waiver and put it on auto return. It should be back at the ship after Chopper gives you this dial, and I will be on this island by time sun rises. If I am not, then set sail without me. I would return as soon as I am able. For now, Nami, take care of my hat. I will return for it, I promise. Recording ends. The crew looked out and saw the waiver slowly riding back to the ship and no Luffy in sight. Nami screamed, Luffy. Usopp looked at Chopper. What happened to Luffy while we were out during the attack, he asked looking at Zoro and Nami. After a few seconds Nami spoke. He pushed himself and after almost dying to Big Mom and Akainu he wasn't at full strength, but he still did it. He pushed past Gear 4th and his body shrunk to its normal size, but it was his haki that made it look different. It was like it formed an unbreakable armor over his skin, and it made a tangible weapon a staff. He looked like he was in Gear 4th, but his body was in its normal state, and every swing of his fist released a conqueror's haki wave at Jaji, and his staff tore him apart. It looked like his body itself was the very embodiment of haki. Chopper then understood what happened to Luffy. I think it's a type of haki-related illness, his body isn't used to overusing it, and I'm sure it's supposed to be limited, so it's having a negative effect on his body. He has what I can only describe as haki poisoning, and it's acting like he was injected with kairoseki. It's stopping most of his devil fruit abilities. He won't last long without rest and having that poison removed, so we need to find a haki specialist. Give him 6 weeks at best. I told him this already, but who knows what more he can do if he forces it. It may be worse than my original diagnosis. Nami runs out to the waiver, almost reaching it when Zoro stops her. Move Zoro, I need to stop him. He's gonna get himself killed. I can't take it if please Zoro, let me go to him. Nami cried as everyone was at her back looking at her desperation. Sorry Nami, Zoro said as he knocked her out. Luffy would kill me if something happened to you. He hands Nami, now unconscious, to Robin. Take her to his room. She should calm down enough by time she wakes up for her to understand why I did what I did. Suddenly the ship starts rocking as 4 Sea Kings arise around them, and Zoro instantly cuts one down with a Wado Ichimonji and looks at the other 3 seething with rage. The menace, I just have a bit of anger I need to release, he says staring at the remaining Sea Kings near the ship as he hears Midori Bashi. Takuro Bakuhatsu. So, an explosion is seen in the water, and a Sea King is seen floating now dead. I think I know how you feel, Zoro, Usopp says as they stand back to back. Just don't slow me down, Soj King, Zoro said, and Usopp answered, just try to keep up, Zoro. Back at the island, Luffy just finished explaining what happened to Sabo and Kobe. So that's what's been going on, and why the Marines are in such an uproar over your crew lately, Kobe stated. So what is your plan now? Wait, what do you mean you have haki poisoning, Luffy? That's a serious disease, Sabo asked looking worried. Sabo, relax, it's not really poison, it's the staff I told you about. Since I don't have a medium for it, it has to sit in my body, and the haki looking color of it won't go away. But Chopper is right, this overload of my abilities has trained me, and if I don't find a medium for it soon, I may end up not making it, Luffy stated. What the hell am I gonna do with you, my stupid little brother? Sabo asked. Kobe, back to your question. First part of my plan is as I told you and left for my crew on the dial. The second part is having you become part of my crew here as my official spymaster and have Sabo take the 2 boys with him to the Revolutionary Army to keep them safe and maybe learn a few things on the way back to the East Blue. Okay Luffy, I'm in, says Kobe. If I didn't help I would regret it, wouldn't I? Asks Sabo. Let's go guys, time to pull off the world's most dangerous prison break, Luffy said, cracking his knuckles, knowing what was to come. Luffy, Sabo, and Kobe begin walking towards Vulcan's Ward, the prison that housed the most dangerous of all devil fruit users, knowing that within a matter of moments, he would be within the walls to rescue his childhood friend from the monster who took everything from. He knew that he would fulfill his promise no matter the cost. As he stood beside Sabo and Kobe, he looked resolute. Kobe, we're going over, remember guys, once we're inside, we need absolute stealth until we find her. Kobe looked at Luffy and only said 2 words, yes captain, he spoke proudly. Sabo said he would take the first jump over the wall and jumped using his fire powers in short bursts, just enough to get him up to the top of the wall, past the sea prism stone. You guys come up next. The moment he said this, Luffy began jumping on the air in his gear 2nd form, as did Kobe using Geppo. As the trio locked down into the prison, Luffy realized it almost reminded him of Impel Down and the Heat Hell. He then let out a wave of Conqueror's haki, as did Sabo and Kobe, immediately knocking out all lower level guards in the vicinity, and they began their silent assault on the prison. Unbeknownst to them, they were being watched by none other than Bartholomew, Kuma and Sentomaru, who had since their blunder in Sabaody Archipelago with Luffy and crew escaping been assigned as prison wardens by Akainu. While the trio ran towards what should be the center of the prison, Sabo spotted a sign that pointed to the offices. As he turned back towards Luffy, he saw Sentomaru above Luffy with an axe coming down. Almost instantly he screamed for Luffy, who had already noticed Sentomaru coming down above him. Luffy then activated his armament haki, and his staff appeared almost instantly. He blocked the oncoming attack and delivered one of his own, sending the Yokozuna back, while Kobe, who noticed there was a second figure, used Luffy's shoulder and jumped up to attack the former warlord, who because of his new status as a pacifista, calculated that he would be able to attack Kobe before Kobe attacked him. He was surprised to realize that his pad cannon had almost little to no effect on the former marine, who then stood in a peculiar stance upon landing. Sentomaru, having caught himself before he slammed into the wall from Luffy's initial attack, looked up and noticed that the two people beside him were not his usual crew and that one of them was a marine captain. As it finally set in his mind, he realized that the three men who were standing in front of him were three of the strongest men outside of the admirals he had ever met. He looked on at Luffy with resolute determination and he spoke, "Straw Hat, today's the day you fall." Then at the top of his lungs he screams, "PX1, take down that revolutionary," he declared, pointing at Sabo. Suddenly another person jumped over Sabo and straight into Kobe, who had just in time activated Tekai and held both of his hands out to stop the two kukri blade from piercing his abdomen and neck. He then looked at the face of his once longtime companion and friend Helmeppo. "What are you doing here? I thought you would be somewhere closer to Akainu or Kizaru," Kobe asked defiantly. "Why did you do it, Kobe-san? Why did you leave the Marines? I thought it was your dream to become an officer. If it was, why did you abandon it?" Helmeppo asked as he pushed Kobe back with his blades. "Because he took my dream and warped it," Kobe replied, brandishing two of his own blades and charging Helmeppo. Sabo looked at the former friend commander turned robot with sadness in his eyes. "Kuma-sensei, I'm sorry I couldn't be there when you needed us. But I promise today is the last the world government will have with you at their beck and call," Sabo spoke tearfully as the cold android watched him. Kuma then took his traditional sumo stance and threw forward an open palm, pad cannon. Sabo jumped to the side and launched Ace's signature attack, High Ken, he screamed, hitting Kuma's next attack. Sabo looked as his flames were absorbed by the pad cannon, making a small implosion. "What the hell is going on? How did you?" he started before jumping out of the way to avoid a volley of pad cannons. Sabo begins attacking Kuma with vicious blows using his devil fruit ability, and as he was attacked and bombarded, taking massive damage and trying to fight using Ace's signature fire fist technique. "What the hell are you doing?" He turned to see Luffy standing there screaming at him and Sentomaru embedded in the wall behind him as everyone stopped looking at him as he stared daggers at Sabo, who looked confused. "Why are you using Ace's fruit so sloppily?" Luffy then looked at Sabo with the same face he gave since they were kids. "What do you want me to do?" asked Sabo as he was dodging pad cannons and hits from Kuma. "You're not Ace, don't fight like Ace, fight like Sabo or else he'll kick your ass for Ace," Luffy screamed defiantly, staring at Sabo, who then realized with all of his training, he was still trying to emulate Ace's fighting style instead of his own dragon fighting style. Sabo, feeling ashamed, looks at Kuma, who waits for a response to all of his attacks and jumps at Sabo, appearing in front of him almost instantaneously. "Sorry sensei, you would be ashamed if you could actually see me now," Sabo said as he made his signature dragon claw covered in haki and ignited it. "Dragon's Claw Flame Revolver," he called out as his talon-shaped fist hit Kuma. He rotated his hand, sending the flames through his massive body. As Kuma felt the flames in his body, he felt his cybernetics explode and the inside of his body cauterized. He began to smile. "Good job, Sabo," he whispered as his body flew and ultimately ignited from implosions. Sabo looked on to see that Kobe was still fighting Helmeppo, both using haki and Sentomaru, pulling himself out of the wall panting, while Luffy looked at him with disinterest. "Oi sumo guy," Luffy spoke to Sentomaru, who looked at him angry at his own weakness. "Let's stop now, I don't want to hurt you, and you know you can't win." Luffy had been dodging and blocking all of Sentomaru's attacks, and he was livid. "Not this time, Straw Hat, I won't let you go again, and after I catch you, I will be sure to catch the rest of your crew, starting with that pretty little navigator of yours SH. Before Sentomaru could finish, Luffy's hand had firmly planted itself squarely in his stomach, flooring him, causing him to throw up blood. As he looked up, he saw Luffy's face twisted with malice, and his haki was pouring off of him in waves. "I will kill you if you outry," Luffy spoke clearly and with ferocity, each word assaulting Sentomaru with haki as he passed out. Sabo looked at Luffy, and so did the former Marine and his ex-partner and once best friend, realizing that Helmeppo had stopped attacking Kobe, took this opportunity to take out his twin Kongsberg Colts and fire haki-infused bullets, shattering his two blades. Much to Helmeppo's surprise, as he looked back, he saw Kobe's smiling face and hand held out. "Hey Helmeppo, come with us, maybe you will find your dream with us." Helmeppo looked as Kobe extended his hand, and Luffy and Sabo smiling at the duo. He began to smile. "Fine, but you owe me 2 new swords," Helmeppo said, smiling with tears in his eyes. "Alright guys, we are gonna have to be quick since stealth didn't work," Luffy ordered. "Kobe, you and Shin-san direct find where we need to go, look through the files and find them." "Wait, there is a problem, Luffy," Sabo exclaimed. "You never told us her name, how can they look her up?" Luffy then thought back and said, "Oh yeah, her name is Vegapunk Migi, and her brothers are Nobu and Aichi. They are only 9 years old. We have to save them and get them away from here before Akainu finds out." Helmeppo has a realization upon hearing Luffy say this. "Yeah, we gotta hurry, he is on his way here now with the Germa Corporation," Helmeppo says as Sabo and Luffy both stop moving, their faces visibly enraged. "I'll rip him to pieces when he gets here, you guys go save them," Luffy says, his hat shadowing his eyes. "Luffy, I know how you feel. He took our brother away from us, but right now those 3 people's safety is what's important," Sabo stated through his clenched jaw. Luffy clenched his fists before looking down knowing Sabo was right. He put his hand over the X-shaped scar on his chest. Next time I see him I'll kill him, he swore. Kobe returned to them with Helmeppo and told Luffy that the woman he was looking for was in cell block P3 and the kids on cell block Z3, they are in opposite wings. We are gonna have to separate Helmeppo-san, you go with Sabo-san, and me, and Luffy will go get the girl, Kobe said. Alright guys, we gotta move fast and be accurate, meet back at the shore in 1 hour, Sabo said, looking at the new 4-man cell. Break, they all shouted as the four separated into their groups. Luffy and Kobe running to a halt down a flight of stairs as Sabo and Helmeppo ran through a darkened red and green hallway. As the four men started running to their respective destinations, Sabo turned to Kobe and asked, "Did you find the information I asked for?" Kobe looked back at him and nodded his head before asking, "Who is this mystery person that we're going to search for?" Her cell isn't far from the kids in terms of number, but why can't Luffy know? Kobe looked at Sabo half expecting him not to answer. After what seemed like a long time he finally spoke. Her name is Anastasia Marijois, she is the princess of the Celestial Dragons, as well as the wife of Monkey D. Dragon. It took a minute for Kobe to put 2 and 2 together, and he stopped running and looked at Sabo. Does that mean that she is? He began to question, but was stopped as Sabo answered, "Yeah, we have to keep running, I will explain, but we have to keep moving," he stated as bullets started flying near them, indicating that they were spotted. Kobe nodded while he and Sabo started returning shots hitting their targets as they started running again. Start talking, Sabo-san. Before Luffy was born his father was a marine, and not just any marine, he was an admiral. And while he held this rank everyone knew it was a clear underestimation of his abilities. The reason why he stayed at this rank is because of the position they gave him. He was the singular guard of the Marijois royal family. Even amongst the celestial dragons they were treated differently and their top prize was their oldest daughter Anastasia. Dragon began protecting her family as the youngest marine admiral in history at the age of 19. He became an admiral, and Sengoku decided that it would be best for him because of his abilities to be the one who kept the royal family safe. Unbeknownst to him and the king, after a certain incident, the young princess and the marine began a secret relationship. Flashback. Dragon had arrived at the gates of Marijois with his 3-man team, consisting of himself, a young Rob Lucci and a young Akainu. He looked over at his 2 young wards and told them that for now they would be protecting the Golden City, as they both looked at him and saluted. As they were walked into the palace they were taken to the throne room for the king and queen sat awaiting to greet their new guardsmen. As they entered the room Dragon told Lucci and Akainu to be on guard as they all sensed the presence of people around them that were hidden. The king then waved his hands and the royal guards jumped out at the 3 men, assuming they were none the wiser. Much to their surprise this was not the case. Dragon then turned to look at his subordinates, then smiled as he stated, "Rob, take the ones on the left, Akainu take the ones on the right." As both men had their assignment Dragon continued to walk forward to greet the king. Stopping right in front of the throne he smiled and bowed as another man jumped at him, only to be slammed away by the younger of the 2 battling marines. Within moments the entire regiment of soldiers that were sent by the king to test the abilities of his new personal guards were scattered decorating the walls and floor of the throne room. Dragon then spoke, "Greetings your majesty, my name is Monkey Dragon, Northern Marine Admiral, also known as Dragon of the North, and these 2 gentlemen behind me go by Rob Lucci, my lieutenant first class, and Sakazuki Akainu, my lieutenant commander." Both of which had got down on one knee and bowed to the king and queen, both of which smiled at the results produced by the younger men before looking at Dragon, who stood completely unscathed and untouched due to the efforts of his wards. The king then looked at Dragon and spoke, "Why did you not defend yourself? Why allow the 2 young men to do all of the battling? What reason do I have to trust that you will be able to do what it is we require?" At this Dragon's smile left and he looked at the king, "Before, if you are able to see me in combat, you should see the 2 younger men I have trained personally." The queen looked at him then back to her husband and laughed, "It should be fine, the entire 3rd regiment was in this room and they didn't stand a chance, and while they went to attack him, they were swiftly stopped by the 2 younger boys, and this boy, well, he did nothing to stop them, he could have easily taken down this whole room before they had a chance to react," she states matter-of-factly. Dragon noticed she was using observation hockey and began to laugh. The king then looks to Dragon then the boys with him and says, "Fine, I will allow it," then begins calling for a young girl wearing an all-black maid's dress and chains visibly on her ankles and neck with shoulder-length silver hair. "Usagi, take Mr. Dragon and his friends to their guards' quarters immediately. Upon seeing her Dragon stopped smiling and began following her without saying a word. As they reached their destination through the garden she opened the door for them, entered showing them around. Dragon turned to Akainu and Rob Lucci before asking, "Little girl, how old are you?" She turned to Dragon, a smile on her face. 15 Master Dragon, is that okay? Akainu looked at her disgusted as he was almost 25 at the time and Rob Lucci was just 16, but he was a special case. "Why are you working here, where's your family?" asked Rob, who seemed genuinely concerned. To which she replied almost in a robotic tone, I am the property of the Great Ones as decreed by the Gorsei's law. I must remain with my masters until such a time when I am no longer a useful tool, she said with a smile, dodging the question. Dragon looked at her painfully, wishing there was a way he could help, while Lucanu simply nodded, and Rob Lucci was clenching his fist thinking about what he could do to help her change the situation. Dragon grabbed his shoulder and shook his head, letting him know now was not the time. Cheese then looked at the three men and stated, dinner will be ready promptly at 6. There you will meet the remainder of the royal family. As per my master's order, clothing has been set for you all, and she walked out of the house, closing the door behind her. Dragon then looked around between himself and Rob Lucci, and then to Akainu, who had simply walked away from his group, closing the door behind him to his room. Dragon then told Rob Lucci that he has to begin to keep his emotions in check, at least while they are in the presence of others. Rob simply nodded, understanding why his leader had said this. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make any sense. How can we preach justice? Will we capture and enslave the very people we are meant to protect? Rob questioned his superior. So what? You Dragon responded, I understand how you feel and why you feel the way you do, but we cannot do anything from the outside. If we want to make a change, we currently have to try to do it from within. Unbeknownst to both men, Akainu was listening at his door, and as he entered his room further, he grabbed a baby Den Mushi from his coat and reported to the Gorosei they had arrived and everything that had happened so far. Later that night there was a knock on the door, and Lucci went to open it. Hey Usagi-chan, come in. We are just waiting for the Admiral, he stated as he was now wearing the clothes that were laid out for him, and Akainu was standing by the stairs looking at his watch before screaming, Dragon, it's time. The witch Dragon came out wearing a suit, carrying his jacket, wearing a black vest over a green dress shirt and black tie. Yeah, alright, let's go. But that they followed they silver-haired maid out through the garden and into the palace. They were presented with seats as they begin to realize this wasn't just a dinner. This was an important social party. For whatever reason, they had been invited to watch over what was going to unfold, and what happened next no one would expect. As Dragon, Lucci, and Sakazuki watched the party, they saw the royal family descending the stairs, and then announcer stood by at the bottom as here. I would like to introduce the Mariageois royal family. King Alexei Mariageois III, Queen Irina Mariageois, First Prince Alexei Mariageois IV, Second Prince Artur Mariageois, Princess Katerina Mariageois, and finally the future Queen of Mariageois, the First Princess Anastasia Mariageois. As she began to descend the stairs, Dragon's eyes could not leave her form. It was as if he was looking at a goddess. The other three children themselves were not bad to look at, they all were alluring, but to him her eyes and her blonde almost golden hair captured his soul. It wasn't until Rob Lucci tapped him and snapped him out of it that he realized that he was being called to the front by the king, along with the rest of his team in front of everyone. The throne. All three walked slowly to the throne and knelt to the king. Your Majesty, Admiral Dragon and company are present, announces the presenter. The king looks at Dragon and company before speaking. I'm glad you were able to join us today. You three will each be guarding one of my children. Firstly, Sakazuki Akainu, you will stand beside my eldest son as his aide and guardian. Secondly, you Rob Lucci will be guarding and training my youngest daughter, as per the agreement made with the Gorosei. And finally, Admiral Dragon, he says, staring in Dragon's eye, you will guard my eldest daughter until the day she be wed, as per the agreement with your fleet admiral and vice admiral. Dragon, Lucci, and Sakazuki all stated, Majesty, your will be done, before standing near their new charges. Dragon then turned to the princess who was placed into his care and stated, it's very nice to meet you, Princess Anastasia. My name is Monkey Dragon, to which she replied by simply looking away from him and back to the crowd as they all descended the stairs. After about an hour of the Marine trio getting to know the group that they would be charged with watching over, the king made an announcement, Mr. Dragon, will you and your cohorts please follow me? As Dragon and the others heard this, they excused themselves. As they followed the king into the throne room, it was eerily silent. Your Highness, what's the point in calling us all down here after you have finally given us our mission? Dragon questioned, looking at the king as he sat in this room. The reason I have called you all here, it's to tell you that from now until the end of your mission, you will be assigned new housing with each of your charges. Watch over and protect my children. This is a mission of the utmost importance. We are currently being threatened by the pirate Golden Lion Shiki. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, the siblings were talking. Katerina. Do you believe that we have to sit with these cretins of low birth? Arthur. Exactly, sister, it's ghastly to know that we have to deal with such scrutiny all because of a silly threat against father. If it wasn't for those damned. Anastasia. Silence, you two, it's bad enough we have to deal with it. We already know it's just silly words, nothing serious will come from it, and then we'll be rid of these minor guards and on with our lives, as if they were never here. Katerina and her brother begin to speak when the lights go out and everyone screams. Then suddenly all three are grabbed and rushed out of the hall under cover of night, and when the lights came on there was a moniker painted on the wall of Shiki and a letter on the throne for the king. As everyone looked around, it was heard throughout the castle as Queen Irina screamed. Back at the king's study, the three men had heard the first screams and began making their way back to the throne room where the party was being held. As they made it in, the king saw the markings on the wall and the letter upon his throne. I need everyone to leave this room immediately, except for Admiral Dragon and his team, as well as my son Alexei. As everyone left the room, the young man walked up to his father. Father, what is the meaning of this? As the king looked to his son, he began to read the letter aloud. Your Highness, I have warned you time and time again that eventually I would be coming for the girl who will be my bride. Now you must choose between the two. Either your oldest daughter or your youngest daughter. Your son was taken for good measure, so that you understand my reach is expansive. Even within the safe walls of your kingdom, I was able to get in and out unnoticed and take 3 of your children. If you'd like to have them back, then it'll cost you 2 billion bili each. The clock is ticking, make sure you have what I've asked for, have 1 hour. The look of sheer disgust, rage, and fear all settled in the king and queen's faces as they looked at Dragon, Lucci, and Akainu. There was an agreeing look between the 3. Dragon began giving orders. Lucci, I need you to go find your charge, and Akainu, I need you to contact the Gorosei as soon as you find yours and let them know that I'm moving out, and to clear all marine vessels from the sea and send for my father's fleet, he stated as he exited the castle. Dragon looked back at his teammates and stated, these are world-class pirates, take no prisoners, that's an order. Hi! Screamed Akainu and Lucci as they scattered, both using Geppo and Sari simultaneously. Dragon turned to the king and queen, don't worry about it, just bring your children home, he said as he launched himself towards the port landing in the city to see some of Shiki's pirates still scattered around as he began to savagely beat them and they began to defend themselves from the onslaught. He was suddenly fired on with a cannon. As he turned around at the last possible second, he reached and grabbed the cannonball out of the air, making all the pirates begin to try to run. Dragon decimates everyone, except for the one who was calling the orders. As he tried to run, Dragon grabbed him by the collar. What the hell did you do? What the princesses and the prince? He asked furiously, the man almost about to pass out. Each of the 3 crews who sail under Shiki's banner, including his own, took 1 royal. Captain Candy took Princess Katerina, Captain Largo took Prince Ardor, and Captain Shiki himself took for his bride Princess Anastasia. Where are they? Where did he take them? Dragon questioned, seething with anger. The pirate looked as if he saw Satan himself standing before him, even realized no matter what he did, he could not escape the situation, so he told him. Captain Largo took over the warehouse district in the ports there, Captain Candy took over the district nearest the calm belt, Captain Shiki took his prize and the sailing out to sea. At this, Dragon smiled, he would be able to get all 3 back, and that worst come to worst, Princess Anastasia could swim home. As he said this over his den mushi to his 2 teammates, he then heard the man still in his hand laugh. What's so funny? You do realize that when I come back only half of you will be arrested, the other half will end up slaves to these people. Dragon is inquisitively. The man begins to speak, it doesn't matter if you get her off the boat or not, unless you have a way to get her back to shore. My captain found a very interesting item on our travels here, it's a special Akuma no Mi, even rarer than a normal Oja's own type fruit. He found a mythological type zone fruit, the Nico no Mi. Modeled by Akko. Dragon's eyes went wide as he heard this. The 4th and final of the godly fruit of direction was found this far north, the white tiger god by Akko. He then heard Rob Lucci speak over the den mushi, Admiral, permission to execute all pirates involved. Sir? What do we do? I need a response before I proceed. Admiral Dragon, Lucci screamed, finally snapping Dragon out of his thoughts. Arigato Lucci, Dragon said as he looked at his den mushi, shatter every soul you come up against that opposes you, injustice, destroy them, I'm going after Shiki. With that, he dropped his den mushi and started running on the sky, kicking it harder and harder with each stride. Dragon let out a guttural roar filled with hockey as he neared the ship, causing half of the people on board Shiki's ship to pass out. As he landed, Shiki looked at him ready to fight until Dragon finally took unheard of combat stance and saw that with his first attack, it destroyed part of the ship. As Shiki charged Dragon, he saw that Dragon's hand had become covered in scales and his eyes changed to a golden color with slits in them. It was only then that Golden Lion Shiki realized the man who stood before him was none other than the son of Vice Fleet Admiral Monkey D. Garp, aka Garp the Fist. Marine Admiral Monkey D. Dragon Akka, the demon dragon of the north, where his Princess Anastasia released her, and the rest of your crew may live, if not I'll sink this entire vessel. Shiki looked as if he'd seen a ghost before he smiled. How about instead you come work for me, and the Prince Alexei, I mean she is supposed to be my prize for successfully infiltrating Mariajwa and causing the biggest star in 40 years in the Golden City, along with the entire East Blue. At the news that he had been set up, Dragon's temper began to boil, then upon hearing the next thing out of Shiki's mouth, his rage reached its tipping point. It's not hard, one of your subordinates has already turned his back on you, and this working for the prince instead of the king. You know the one, yes, I believe his name is Sakazuki Akainu. He did this in return for finally obtaining the Akuma no Mi he had been searching for since he first joined the Marines, the Magu no Mi. At this dragon's haki exploded. The pressure in the air caused the ship itself to crack. Shiki took advantage and charged at Dragon, only to be stopped by a scaled beast introducing itself to his mouth and a swift follow-up axe kick, shattering the remaining bones in both legs below the knee. He then activated his observation haki to find where the princess was being held. When he found a chamber that he could not see into, he ran at top speed, almost instantly appearing in front of a cage. He grabbed the cage doors and ripped them apart. As he walked in, he found the princess chained in a half-tiger state. Her once golden hair was now white with black streaks resembling that of a Siberian tiger. She looked at Dragon and began to cry as he shattered the shackles keeping her bound. She wrapped her arms around him, running into his arms, scared of what she should do when he stated, "I will keep you safe." He then carried her off the ship to a nearby vessel on which Akainu and his father were waiting. Akainu approached with the two princes behind him, smiling. "Admiral Dragon, you have officially been stripped of your ranking for the murder of the king and queen of Mariajwa." His heart almost stopped as he looked to his father for confirmation, only to see him look away. He put down the princess and was about to be chained when the princess spoke. "What is the meaning of this? He just saved me, and now you arrest him on false allegations." She stood demanding an explanation. "Sister, he wasn't there to protect them when we were attacked by straggling pirates, as was the duty assigned to him by the Gorosei. If it wasn't for his two counterparts, then our younger brother and sister would also have been murdered." Alexei spoke, trying to show authority. "Alexei Mariajwa IV, I am the next in line to grace the throne by birthright. Until my cipher pole looks into this, you will do nothing, and Sir Dragon will be my personal guards and combat trainer, and pardon during that time," she states, wiping her brother's smiles away. "Fine sister, as you wish dear sister," Alexei and Ardor stated. "And you, I believe your name was Sakazuki," she stated, pointing to Akainu. "Yes, your majesty," he stated, trying to hold in his malice. "It seems like you will no longer be needed here. Please send another Vice Fleet Admiral Garp." After a few seconds, Akainu looks up at her with hatred in his eyes. "Oi, little princess, how dare you?" Before he can finish, he is met with a haki-infused fist to his stomach that leaves him breathless and coughing up blood as he looks to Dragon, who stands above him and leans down to his ear before whispering, "You betrayed me. If you ever show your face before me again, I will eviscerate you." To which Akainu nodded. Garp looked at his son, beaming with pride as Dragon saluted him. "Vice Fleet Admiral, I am requesting to replace Lieutenant Commander Sakazuki Akainu with Vice Admiral Isan Kashiro." Garp responded, "Permission granted, Lieutenant Commander Sakazuki Akainu. You are to return with me to Marineford, and in 3 days' time Vice Admiral Kashiro will arrive on this island. Lieutenant Commander, you are relieved of duty as of this time. Please go to the sickbay and await further instructions." Garp stated in his most authoritative voice. As Akainu nodded and left the deck of the ship, Garp and Dragon began to laugh as they hugged, only for it to be cut short as Dragon looked at his father and asked what the hell is going on. Immediately realizing what his son meant, he stated he has no idea, but he didn't believe for a second that he was involved with the murders of the king and queen. At this, Dragon's eyes went, "So it's true they really work him while I was out trying to save the princess," he thought. He then told his father exactly what Shiki had said. Upon hearing this, Garp began to understand what was going on and why today they were attacked. He told Dragon that no matter what happens, he has to see things through with his own eyes and judge from there. Dragon simply nodded as he carried the princess all the way to shore using Geppo, while the princes were ferried back by marines on a small ship. Upon reaching the shore, he saw Rob Lucci standing there waiting for him with the princess standing beside him. Upon seeing his supervisor, he finally let down some of his attention and began to smile in spite of his injuries. Dragon then thought of something and used his Den Mushi to call back to Garp. As Garp answered the ringing transponder, "Vice Fleet Admiral, it would seem that my fleet is now short a lieutenant commander. If possible, I would like to give the promotion to Rob Lucci." As he waited for his answer, he had finally reached Rob and Princess Katerina, and just as they reached, they are heard over the transponder, "Snail, I hereby grant permission for the promotion of Rob Lucci from First Lieutenant to Lieutenant Commander of the Northern Dragon Fleet." And then the transponder hung up as Rob stood there excited for what had just occurred. He received a major promotion due to his diligence, hard work, and Akainu's betrayal. 2 years later, Dragon was still watching over the now queen as suitor after suitor came and presented themselves to become the next king, and the princes were adamant marry their sister off, while unbeknownst to them, she was already sharing her bed with a marine who saved her the night she became known as the Tiger Empress. And while Dragon knew this was all just for formality, he still didn't like the idea of men coming up and presenting themselves to his woman, but they had to keep up appearances in the castle so that no one suspected their secret. The affair had been going on for a little over a year by this time. Rob Lucci was beginning to move out of the Marines and into his own role as the leader for Princess Katerina's personal cipher pole division, CP9, the assassination division. She had even at this time begun procuring an Akuma no Mi for him. Even as he began moving away from his duties as a marine into his new position, he knew one thing would always remain true: he would never betray Dragon, who was the closest thing to family he had unbeknownst to him, and two women who have changed their lives so much: their brothers the princes were making deals in the shadow to overthrow the current regime, and one of those deals was with Sakazuki, who at this time had become an admiral, the same rank as Dragon, due to his influence with the Gorosei. As the prince's key agent was none other than the young woman who worked in the castle from the moment they had arrived, the young silver-haired woman simply known Yasagi. The entire time she had been there, she was working for the second prince, who agreed to release her as long as she fed him information about what the queen was doing in her spare time, which meant the princes both knew that the queen was sleeping with someone who was not of royal blood. They used this to capture Dragon and take him out to sea where Sakazuki was awaiting him. "You are a traitor to true justice, Admiral Dragon," spoke an elated Sakazuki. "You have forcefully defiled the queen, and she now carries your seed." The queen spoke. "No, he didn't." Dragon began to tell her to stop, but the queen insisted. "I am in love with him. I decided to lay with him, an honorable who saved me and this kingdom. So what if he isn't of royal blood?" Unbeknownst to them, this was being shown to the entire city of gold, and already the people began to scream unclean, abomination, demon seed. At this, the elders of the celestial dragons stated her child is to be expelled, and she is to be sold off as a noble slave. Dragon broke free of his cuffs and grabbed the noble, breaking his neck, almost forgetting Akainu was there only to be slammed on the ground, and he and the princess locked away. 2 weeks out to sea, Dragon has been informed he will be going to level 6 of Impel Down. He looked over at the expecting mother of his child and smiled as he said, "I love you." After another week at sea, a few young marines placed Dragon in shackles and branded his body the mark of a traitor with metal made of sea prism stone, and wrote the traitor's mark tattoo on his face. When they began to approach Anastasia with a slave brand, his hockey activated, knocking them out. Then there was a sudden explosion on the ship. Everyone was running around trying to stop whoever was destroying the ship. Just then Akainu slammed through the deck into the bottom of the ship unconscious, and the slightly older Rob Lucci stepped forward as he told Dragon, "We have to get you out of here, and you have to go on the run. You have to go somewhere safe. This is all we can do for you," he said as he cut open the bars and chains holding them. He looked at his former student with pride and relief as he grabbed his pregnant lover and carried her and jumped onto the deck, followed by Rob Lucci and 3 others who all wore masks. As they landed on the smaller boat about 10 nautical miles out, a woman suddenly ran out and hugged the former queen. "How you been? How's the pregnancy? Is everything okay? Do you need anything?" The young princess asked before looking at Dragon. "How could you let this happen? How could you let it be found out? What did you think was going to happen when they found out she was carrying your child? Regardless of how many times you saved our family, she was then cut off by her older sister. You cannot solely blame this on him, Kat. It's just as much my fault as it is his. He didn't betray anything." She finally tells her younger of the events that have transpired 2 years as prior during their kidnapping. Katerina looked with disgust as she realized her 2 older brothers had planned this entire thing. With the help of the world government 100 finally coming down, she looked at Dragon's face and his tortured body and apologized profusely and thanked him for taking the brunt of the pain and not allowing her sister to be subject to such torment, to which he replied, "I'm only doing my duty as a man and as her husband if she will have me," he stated as he looked into her eyes right before passing out from his injuries and hunger, to which Rob Lucci caught him and told his crew to set sail for the submarine in the East Blue. 3 months later, Dragon finally awoke with a start, wondering where he was until Garp walked in the room. "Oi Gaki, do you realize what you've done?" Garp asked, only to be responded with, "Where is Anna? Is she okay? Is the baby okay? How long was I out? Where am I?" He gets stopped by a fist to the head. He looks up at Garp, who is fuming. "What the hell? Why are you worried about that girl? You became an enemy of the world government. Is she worth that?" He looks at his father and simply asks, "Would mom have been worth fighting against the world government?" Garp looked at his son, floored at his question, remembering his late wife. "Does this girl mean that much to you? You'd bring up Havana?" He looked at his son, who had a resolute look on his face. Just then the door opened and Anna ran in and jumped on Dragon, who caught her and smiled, tears in his eyes. Garp, realizing he had lost, simply smiled and looked at his son. "I will keep you here in secret. You are home in the Dawn Islands back in Fuchsia village. I will go back to Marineford to smooth this over. Keep hidden here." 2 years later, Dragon was walking in the door and a 1-year-old Luffy sitting at a table as Anastasia was teaching him to talk. As she tried teaching him the word mama, he kept saying meat. Dragon was laughing and kissed his wife and son. He had become the island's protector and started a small underground information network Hirab pirated to get by, and met Shanks, becoming the greatest of friends with the Emperor, even going as far as making him Luffy's godfather. While on a work in the village bar and met a young girl named Makino, who after months of being friends and helping her deliver her baby, became Luffy's godmother. It was 6 months to the boy's 2nd birthday when they finally got a call on their transponder from Guard, telling them that they were safe and could do whatever they chose to do with their newfound freedom. Dragon was considering his options one day when Michael O'Hare and his house banging on the door. As he opened the door he looked at the young lady. "What's wrong, what's going on, you look like you've seen a ghost." She caught her breath and looked him in the eye before stating, "They are Marines in the village, and they've surrounded your wife, she told me to come get you, there's also a celestial dragon ship at the port." Dragon eyes went wide as he ran into the village, hoping not to be too late. Upon arrival he noticed that the younger of the princes within the village standing before his sister with a hand on his blade. He then heard a voice that was unmistakable, it was Sakazuki, Lady Monkey D. "Anastasia, you are hereby under arrest for assault of a world noble and sentenced to life in prison, along with that rat you're holding," he stated, reaching for Luffy. She had taken a partial tiger form and been combating Marines protecting the infant until Akainu burned her as Dragon arrived and she tossed the baby to her husband who caught him. Upon seeing her burn and hearing her scream, the sky had torn asunder, revealing a massive storm brewing. Akainu knew this meant Dragon was near. Still not sensing him, he started to send his marines after the baby who was now in Makino's arms as she ran towards the village to hide out. But when his solders didn't move he saw it finally, he saw why all the marines, the Gorosei, and even Sengoku avoided angering Dragon. What he saw that day still haunts his nightmares. Dragon had become what his name insinuates, but made of wind and lightning, and struck down on Akainu multiple times until Anna grabbed him and he stopped as he looked at her shaking her head while her brother was pissing himself running away. She spoke softly and loving, "It's okay Dragon, if I go with them, they will leave Luffy alone, please protect him, raise him to be the type of man that can make a difference and will wait for my brave warriors to come rescue me. Anna, I can't do this without you, I can stop this now, I will." He gets cut off by Anastasia's hand on his lips. "No, my love, for Luffy's sake as well as your own, don't become your father's enemy so that he won't become his father's enemy." The Marines took her into custody carrying of a half-dead Akainu as he swore vengeance. Flashback over. The rest of what happened was that Dragon was no longer capable of taking care of Luffy in the capacity and infant needed, so he left him with his father in order to pursue the life we live now, and I'm pretty sure you know the rest of Luffy's story. As Sabo finished, he and Kobe were nearing the half-hour mark and had just come up on their first stop. Inside the cell I saw two small animals, a liger cub with gold crown fur and black fur, and a gold lion cub with black crown fur. Sabo called out to the creatures, "Has anyone seen Nobu and Aichi Vegapunk? I need to see the wild Vega twins." The cubs perked up at this and tilted their heads before the golden one spoke. "Who wants to know?" Well, the black one sniffed at the cell door before stating, "You don't smell like guards, why are you here?" Kobe knelt down before speaking, "We are here to break you out at your father's request, Dr. Sasuke Vegapunk." Just then the two boys approached, transforming as they got close, one having black hair, the other being a blonde, both only wore pants no shirts, and had multiple sword and burn marks. Sabo looked in rage at what had been done to these boys. As Kobe simply smiled at them and told them to step back, they both obeyed the young man, who then angled his hands, said Tekai, and cut the bars open. Then he and Sabo removed their jackets, giving them to the kids before proceeding to ask, "Have you seen a woman who is really pretty? She would look like a tiger." They both looked at each other, then looked down. Sabo smiled at them, "We want to rescue her too before it's too late. I'm sure she told you all about Luffy." Their ears perked up and their smiles lit up. "Will he is here to save you too and your sister. After all these years, shouldn't he get to have his mother back?" The twins thought for a second before pointing at the cell directly below them above the lava and the volcano. Sabo looked down and finally noticed there was a woman in the cage. Before he even had a second thought, he jumped down and screamed her name, causing her to look up at him as he landed on her suspended cage softly. "Who are you?" she asked, to which he replied, "My name is Sabo, I'm here to take you to Luffy." She looked at him as it took her a second to process what he said. "So you're here to kill me?" she questioned, looking at the young man. He tilted his head and asked, "What do you mean?" She began to explain that Akainu told her about killing Luffy at Marineford, to which Sabo felt angry and disgusted at the blatant lie. Then he realized something. He smiled and looked at her. "So if I get you out of here and take you to see Luffy, will you accept what I'm saying then?" She looked at the honest boy and nodded, somehow believing him. Sabo melted the top half of the bars before using his Haki and fire powers to burst out of the torture cell. Then he smiled and screamed, "Luffy, 10 minutes left." On the other side of the prison, Luffy and Helmeppo had begun making their trek through the prison, coming across obstacles as well as traps, and even specialized soldiers, including the pacifista. There were 10 specialized mechanized robots, each with a different ability, all of them looking exactly like Bartholomew Kuma. Luffy looked in all the cells, knowing that they were keeping other prisoners. It wasn't until he was near a certain cell that he was compelled to stop. There were 2 beaten up people. One was recognized. She had pink hair and a gold tattoo under her right eye. The other was a man who was wearing a sea stone cuff and had a blonde mohawk long enough to be tied into a ponytail. Luffy instantly recognized the man as his late older brother's best friend and the woman as one of his fellow 11 supernovas. He stopped and called, "Bonnie, Marco." Both looked over at the cell door and saw Luffy grab and mangle the bars using his Haki-covered hands. Both were shocked as Luffy looked at them. "Why are you here?" Marco questioned as Bonnie looked at him like he was a savior. Until Helmeppo arrived and reminded him they had a mission, he looked at Helmeppo and told him to remove their cuffs and take them to get the girl, he said, as his eyes shadowed by his hat. Marco began to protest, then Luffy looked at him and said, Marco, they are holding a teenage girl and her 9-year-old brothers. In order to make Vegapunk work, it will cripple Akainu and the rest of the Marines if we take them out of the picture, and you two need safe passage, right? Marco looked at Luffy in question. Yeah, what is it you're offering? Bonnie asked. Safe passage out of the area, and if you're leaving the Grand Line now to rebuild, or even if you need a new crew, I'm building more people this time. I don't throw people away either and will keep you all safe, he says as he grabs Sentomaru out of the air near and slamming him down. Helmeppo and Marco didn't even realize he was close by, but they did notice he was moving slower than usual. How much training has this kid done, Marco thought. Helmeppo said aloud that he must still be reeling from the battle earlier. It was then that Marco noticed a bruising on Sentomaru's ribcage and face. Bonnie looked over to Marco and nodded at him before stating she was. Marco, understanding her decision, stated that he would become a support pillar for the crew, and the newest ship in the Straw Hat fleet, all of Whitebeard's former fleets, would fall under the Straw Hat banner. Luffy nodded as if to accept this and told them the Mississippi is to save the girl and get out. We have 20 minutes left. Luffy, Bonnie, Marco, and Helmeppo began running towards their destination, leaving Sentomaru hanging above the lava pit by his pants unconscious again. Marco and Bonnie were visibly surprised at how Luffy was more diplomatic in their discussion since they last met. As they reached the 15-minute mark, they reached a cell with a girl walking up to them holding a stopwatch and smiling before she states matter-of-factly, Monkey D. Luffy, you're 4 minutes 21, 22, 23 seconds late. Luffy smiled softly at the purple-haired girl, who wore a mechanic suit with a jacket tied around her waist and a way too tight black sports bra that had the kanji for the word time and a clock tattoo over her belly button. She returned his smile as he opened the cell door in a similar manner to the way he did Marco's. It's nice to see you again, Migi. How long's it been? 9-10 years, Luffy asked. Before he could actually, she planted a nice hot kiss on his lips, shocking Helmeppo and Bonnie. Well, Marco didn't care either way. As soon as she got done, she looked at him and asked, did you fall for me yet? He smiled and said, sorry, it didn't work when we were kids, it wouldn't now that we are grown. As soon as they began to move, screaming was heard of Sabo. Luffy, 10 minutes left. He smiled and screamed, let's go. As they made it back to the wall, each brother noticed they picked up more than they were supposed to, and the woman in back looked at the boy with the straw hat from under her cloak and grabbed Sabo's arm and said, thank you. He looked back and told her keep her cloak on till they reached his ship. This way we can complete the mission before Akainu's arrival. As they started approaching the shore, Luffy stopped and began to think. Sabo and Kobe looked at him and asked why he stopped. He then looked at the ragtag group in front of him. Sabo, how many people can you carry at a time? Luffy asked. Sabo looked and said, I can only carry one. He realized why he asked, looking at the young twins. Well, I have a solution, he said before calling Helmeppo. You can use Geppo and Sora, right? Instantly the three men caught on to what he was thinking and agreed. He then looked over at Marco and Bonnie. I know this is a lot to ask, but Marco, are you strong enough to fly with a person yet? Marco simply nodded, if need be, Captain. But I need you to fly Bonnie to the Sunny and Kobe take Migi to the Sunny. Helmeppo, you will be going with Sabo. I need you to keep those kids and my brother safe. It will be easier if I have a direct line to them from now on. That will be your role, my personal revolutionary liaison, to get in touch with Sabo or my father. Is that okay, Sabo? Luffy asked. Sabo looked at him and thought about it momentarily before realizing his plan had no flaw. He looked at Luffy and asked one thing. Are you okay, Luffy? I know it's hard when he was cut off by Luffy, stating he was fine and they were running out of time, and Migi went to hug her little brothers for the first time in 2 years. She told them they would meet again soon on the seas of the East Blue. The boys smiled assuredly at their sister, no tears shown, and she returned the gesture. Luffy hugged Sabo and told him they would meet again and shook Helmeppo's hand as he and Kobe gave each other an understanding high five. Bonnie and Marco were waiting by the shore when they began to notice dead sea kings floating in the water. As they looked at Luffy, who was approaching it, he saw the woman following him and remembered what Sabo said to him as they separated. Remember, Luffy, she has to go with you. Keep that woman safe, and no matter what, until you reach your ship, do not remove her hood, not until you're on your ship. But Sabo, why? Luffy whined. It's a secret who she is, and if she is seen on this island they will kill her. Take her to your ship, she will explain everything there. I promise it will answer everything you ever wanted to know. He agreed as he carried her bridal style and began steaming as he pumped his legs, then ran on the air. Following closely behind him was Marco and Kobe. As the three men landed on the ship, everyone was running to Luffy. Zoro screamed, what the hell were you thinking? If you're injured then rest and leave the hard stuff to us, hitting Luffy on the head with his sheathed Wado. Luffy laughed and called to Frankie, who was approaching from below deck. Yeah, Captain, Frankie responded. Everyone makes preparations to launch us out. Akainu is on his way, and we can't be stopped here. As Nami walked on the deck fuming, she looked at Luffy, relieved he was safe and angry at what happened between them, but more so that he abandoned her on the ship alone, so she did the only at the time logical thing an angry emotional woman can do to the man she loves. With tears in her eyes she slapped him as hard as she could. Luffy looked at her and said they would talk once they were away from the island. Migi greeted everyone on board with a smile. Only person who hadn't spoken to Luffy yet was Usopp, who didn't know how to respond to the fact that Luffy was right in his message. They were so busy arguing they didn't notice their captain left the ship or even bother asking about his condition. This was his best friend who had risked life and limb for each of them. When had the crew become so selfish? He began inventing to take his mind off the issue for the moment, deciding he would talk to Luffy, Zoro, and Nami later. As they all sat on the deck of the Sunny, the woman in her cloak had been staring at Luffy. She looked, then asked him if they could talk now. Well, the rest of the crew was abuzz as Frankie looked around and told everyone to hold on. Luffy stood holding Migi and the woman in the cloak as everyone else took their usual position, and Frankie screamed coup to burst. As they finally landed outside the comm belt near the East Blue entrance, the woman walked and sat in front of Luffy. This made everyone stop, now on alert, and she pulled her hood off and smiled as he stared at her, processing who she was. She pulled him into a soft hug and spoke, "Hi Luffy, it's me." Luffy started shedding tears, the voice speaking to him, and the warmth of the huge had finally solidified who this woman was to him, as he spoke quietly, "But I thought you how are where were why I missed you, mom." Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. See you in the next video. Goodbye.